Let's make some beginner-friendly groovy cookies. We're gonna be decorating some sugar cookies with royal icing that hardens on top, and these are all beginner-friendly styles. We're gonna make 3 different cookies, we're gonna have 5 different colors, and I'm gonna walk you through all of it. My name is Cami Bird, I'm the creator of Iced.Kitchen, and let's get going. So the first thing you're gonna need is you're going to have to mix together your royal icing, and you're gonna need to bake your cookies. You can find links to both the recipes that I recommend down below. I also have videos that go through those. So the first thing we're gonna do with this royal icing is we're going to divide it and mix up our colors. I am going to use just primary colors to mix these. And so blue, which one is this one? Yellow, and red. It's a little confusing because my red has a yellow tint on the outside and my yellow looks red in the container. But we are going to make yellow, orange, blue, green, and then we also want just white royal icing. Just quick tip on the white, while you don't need to color your icing because you can see it's white already, I do add white food coloring to it. I do it when I'm mixing the whole batch. I find this just helps keep your colors nice and bright. And the other thing is this cookie recipe, if you want them to be soft and not rock hard, some people like rock hard sugar cookies. I am not one of those people. If you want them to be soft, you gotta have some butter in there. And by some, I mean quite a bit. And when you have a lot of butter, it can leak into the rest of your icing after time. So if you color your icing with white, and obviously with all these other colors, you just make sure that you don't get what we call butter bleed. So let's start dividing our icing and then coloring it. We're going to be making 5 different colors of icing, starting with white. I'm taking about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of a scoop. This is completely eyeballing it. And since I've already colored all of my icing white, I don't need to add any food coloring to this, but I am adding a little bit of warm water at a time so I can get the right consistency. The consistency we are going for in this project and all of the other beginning cookie decorating projects is a 15 to 20 second hybrid icing. What this means is that the icing should look a little bit like Elmer's glue. It should kind of glide off of the spatula. You can see I'm pretty much reached that right there. And so I'm going to move on to doing yellow. I want the same amount of icing to start with. But I'm going to be adding yellow food coloring to this. And I definitely start off not adding as much yellow food coloring as I end up using. I think I add 2 more drops later in on this because I want a really rich yellow color. So I always add the food coloring and then I'll do some water on top of that just so it's easier to mix it all together. And I will say that the colors look more vibrant in this video than they do in person, but this is a little too pale buttercream yellow, and we want something really striking because groovy doesn't really say buttercream yellow. So I'm adding a little bit more food coloring here, and I'm mixing to this hybrid consistency. The other way you can tell if your icing is at the right consistency is if you run your spatula through it, and it takes about 15 to 20 seconds to settle. That's why it's also called a 15 or 20 second icing. Now, you can have it kind of anywhere on that spectrum, and you are going to be good. This is also my least favorite part about decorating sugar cookies. I do recommend, if you can do this a day ahead of time, stick your icing in the fridge. As long as it's bagged, it'll be perfectly fine to use the next day. So you can just do all the fun stuff in one day, the decorating, and the not so fun stuff, which is to me getting the right consistency and the right color for my icing. So we got yellow. Next, in the same bowl, I'm doing about the same amount of icing to start with, and we're going to be making orange. And again, I underestimated the amount of food coloring I would need. I already knew that my yellow was a little soft, so I added 3 drops, and then I do just as small as I possibly can drop of red into this because I don't want it to be too red. You can see how small of a drop I got in there. The thing is, when you're using food coloring, less is more. You can always add more food coloring, but you can't take it away. And sometimes you think, I'll just keep adding food color till I get that right color that I'm going for. But sometimes if you add too much food coloring, your icing won't set right. I haven't had that happen in years by just going slow. And while patience is not one of my virtues in the least, it's very, very important for getting your consistency right and for also getting your colors right. And there is a trick to getting your consistency a little thicker if you add too much water, and I show that a little bit later. When we move on to the green. The other thing that I'm doing here is I'm doing a semi one bowl method so that I'm mixing all of my colors in one bowl. Now, I say semi because I actually switched to a different bowl to do the next two colors, green and blue, just because I didn't want some weird color mixes, although it would have been perfectly fine because both of those are very rich colors. So I'm almost to the right consistency here. You can kind of see it's flowing off of the spatula. So let's move on to making blue. I'm starting with blue over green because green is comprised of blue and yellow, so having some leftover blue icing works out perfectly fine. Blue is one of probably the most difficult colors to mix and get a really rich color of, really dark color of, because it needs time to kind of develop, is what we call it in the cookie world. Your color needs time to develop. And this is a lighter blue, and when we decorate, it'll actually be a little bit darker, just because that color has time to develop. And so that's another benefit of mixing your colors the day before, the night before, even the morning of, is your colors are going to have some more time to develop and really kind of like settle into the royal icing. I'm no chemist, so I can't tell you why that happens, any of that, but I just know that it does happen. So I'm adding a little bit more water. I need to get that consistency right. And just mixing. And here it is flowing. Mix it a little bit more. Sometimes you just need to mix it a little bit more in order to get the right consistency. And we're ending with our green. You can see we have some leftover blue in there. And I don't want the blue to be too overpowering, so I only do 1 drop of that. And then I'm adding 2 drops, maybe, I think I even did 3, of yellow. And apparently I just was over yellowing things because I know I come back and add another drop of blue because it was like a little too not a great color of green. Now for this green icing, I do end up adding too much water, and so I always like to save a little bit of my plain stiff royal icing to add in to my mixes so that if I add too much water, I can save it by using some of my stiff leftover royal icing. And I truly only had maybe a few tablespoons extra of royal icing. Now, if you end up using all of your royal icing to mix your colors, don't fear, you can still add about a tablespoon of powdered sugar at a time to thicken up your icing again. It is totally fine to do that. It's not going to change the flavor. It's not going to make it too sweet, but it will allow you to get the right consistency. And you can see this is where I'm adding in probably about 2 tablespoons of extra icing here. And there we go. We have the right consistency and we can get bagging. All right, you have mixed and bagged all but one of your colors. We still have to bag green. The great thing about using the 1 bowl or 1-ish bowl method is that you don't have a lot to clean afterwards, especially I don't have a dishwasher, so I gotta clean it all by hand. But the bad thing is, particularly for these videos, is that you're bagging your colors after every single mix. And so let's bag the last one together. We got green left. So I always have a cup that I put my piping bag in. I just find it works the easiest so that I can really get all of the icing out of the bag. Gonna stick my hand in here. It's a clean hand. And make sure it's nice and wide and open so you can see that I can get all of my icing in there. I'm not getting a whole bunch of air bubbles, stuff like that. And the plus side of using this hybrid consistency, 20-second, 15-second, there's 20,000 names for it, is it should pour right into the bag. So I'm just gonna guide it a little bit and it just flows right in. It really helps with not getting air pockets. And the other great thing about using the cup is I can use the side of it that's covered by the bag to scrape off my spatula and help get the rest of the icing that's left in there. And there we go. I thought I was gonna be making small bags of icing this time around, and here we are with these. I just feel like they're huge. I usually make smaller bags. So I just pop it out, grab the sides, put my cup to the side, and what I do is I have it in one hand, and with the other hand, I'm twisting the bag. And as I'm twisting, I'm moving this hand that's holding the bag a little bit further up all of this excess, so I can have a nice tight twist. And then I get to the end and I just kind of twist it by hand a little bit. And then I'm just wrapping it around my fingers and tying a knot. And I want to make sure that I get all of this top extra part in here so that I can drop my icing back like I did before and my icing not escape. And so this is mixing the consistency, coloring it, and bagging it is my least favorite part about decorating cookies. And when I would decorate with my friend, I would do all the mixing and coloring, and then she would do all the bagging. I don't know, she just must have nimble fingers because it was easy for her. If you're ever unsure of if you got the knot tied correctly, you can just open up the top and see if you have your full circle of top of bag in there. And sometimes if you just completely put too much in your icing bag, you can go get like a chip clip or something. I have a whole bunch of little ones from IKEA and just put it on the top. You can also take rubber bands and wrap them around. But a knot is nice and secure. So now that we have our colors, let's set up our workstation and we'll cut the ends of these bags and we'll actually get decorating. Before we cut the ends of our piping bags, I always like to set up my workstation so that I have all my tools ready to go before I start decorating. And the first step of decorating is cutting the piping bags. I always like to have the seam side up of my piping bag, and then I flatten out as much as possible the end of the tip of the bag, and I cut off just a little bit at a time. So a couple times when I was doing this, and you'll see right here, I actually have too small a hole for me to be piping through, and so I cut a little bit bigger one. Now for this project, you can have it feels weird to say a pretty big hole in the end of your piping bag, but you don't have to have it, you don't need it to be super small and dainty. You can have it be a decent line coming out, and that will actually be really beneficial on this. So you want to repeat that for all of your bags. And then we'll dive right into decorating our cookie. So we're going to start with the tie-dye cookie. And if I'm being completely honest, I didn't love how this one came out, but I'm going to tell you how you can make sure it turns out well. So the first step is to just line the outside of the cookie with your white royal icing. And I'm just doing that a couple times. I want like a pretty thick wall layer outside line so that everything stays inside. And then you're going to come in with one of your colors. I am just making sure that I didn't go over the edge a little bit here so that my line's really stiff and in line with the edge of my cookie. But I'm going to come in with my yellow first and kind of do a spiral. And I want it thicker along the outside and thinner as we go in, because what do spirals look like? They look like exactly that. Now, if I were to do this again, how I would do this is do a spiral about half as big as this, so a smaller spiral, and I would repeat the colors over and over again. And this was really my mistake, and you'll see it as I go through. So I do it with the yellow first, and then I'm going to come in with my next color, which I think is green, coming in soon, and I'm just trying to make like a pretty thick line. I'm feeling comfortable and confident at this point, and I really shouldn't have. But I want to do the same step with the green, and at this point I'm realizing, oh, I'm kind of running out of space in my spiral pretty quickly, and I only have 2 colors, and I have 2 more to go. So I'm going with it. I'm filling it in. For you, you can keep your outside edges where the colors are meeting the white outline. the same thickness, but only do about half that spiral. Just kind of do like a little curve in, and it'll end up looking really well. And I, again, repeat these steps with the orange, and I kind of realize, oh shoot, I am running out of space here. It's okay. It's okay, because you're going to do better, and you're going to tag me in your posts on Instagram or on TikTok decorating cookies, and you're going to show me how your tie-dye cookies look so much better than this one. Because again, I'm repeating with the blue, and you can see I have way less blue in this cookie than green or yellow. Same with the orange. Now I'm filling in with white on this outside, but what I recommend you do is you have white be one of the stripes, but in general, you keep going back and forth, rotating through all of your colors so that they go around the outside of your cookie a little bit more. But it's okay. Cookies are, they're fun. This is the hobby. This is not perfection. We're just looking to improve, and we're trying out new skills. And that's exactly what I did on this tie-dye cookie. And I did 2 more cookies thinking maybe if I change up how I'm approaching this, it'll turn out better. And they didn't turn out better. They just turned out different. One turned out bad, I will say that. Definitely head over to my TikTok. I will share the bad tie-dye cookie. I can't even call it tie-dye. I will share the weirdly decorated cookie with you over on TikTok. But I'm just making sure that everything is evened out right here. And then I'm going to take my scribe and go from the outside to the middle, just dragging my scribe through there. And I'm going to do outside to the middle, maybe like every ½ inch or so. And I'm going to keep doing that. And this is how we get that more tie-dye effect. And this is why even if you did like a little bit of a swirl, it's still going to look good, because we're adding this kind of pull through method for this. Now we're doing every other ½ inch or every ½ inch in, and then we're going to pull out. So we're going to drag that scribe from the center out in between each of those lines. Now, I can recognize that was very confusing directions, so I hope you are seeing what I'm doing more than you are listening to what I'm saying, because it makes way more sense when you see it. And I am notoriously bad for putting my scribe deep into the icing so that there are line marks. And I recommend being a little gentle with it, but if you do the same thing as me, you can kind of stab your scribe in the middle and shake it, and your cookie will help even out a little bit more. Now I'm just coming back and fixing any area that I'm like, that doesn't quite look exactly how I want it to, and making sure my icing's going all the way to the end, getting that little perfection, and there's your tie-dye. Next up, we are going to do the peace sign cookie. So we're going to add a little wavy background with our colors. Starting with the scribe, you're just going to kind of carve in 3 wavy lines that are parallel to one another. And then don't be like me. Take a moment, scrape off that extra cookie dust. I quickly noticed that the cookie dust was getting mixed into my icing, and it didn't look great. And so I take a moment after I fill in this yellow section. So what you're going to do is for each section that you created a line for, you're going to take one of your colors. It doesn't matter which one. Save white. Do not use your white color. Save that for the end. And you're going to outline your area and then fill it in. And you're just going to keep repeating that for each layer. And so you can see I just wiped off that extra cookie dust, and now I'm going through making sure the yellow is all settled. And I'm going to come in with my next color, which is green. And I'm going to outline the edges, cleaning off the end of my green piping bag right there. And then I'm going to start by outlining the edge. And you want to do both sides. This is something that took me a little while to learn, that if you want to use, this is called a wet on wet technique, where you have kind of colors layered next to each other on top of one another. If you want to do that, you can't just rely on the previous line to stay solid because of the pressure of the new icing against it. It can get kind of like wavy and not great. And so you want to add your own outline there. And that's what I did with the green. And then I'm immediately coming back and kind of reinforcing that line with more icing. And then I'm filling the space, going slowly, but you can see there's a lot of pressure on my piping bag. to put more icing out of the piping bag than just a simple little line. And I like to go back and forth. You might go maybe up and down. You might fill in a section and move to another section. There doesn't need to be any rhyme or reason to how you are filling this cookie besides you're filling inside the lines that you created. And we're just taking our time filling it in. We want there to be a Goldilocks amount of icing on this cookie. So we don't want there to be too little, where we get what's called cratering, where different sections of our cookies may look like they kind of caved in a little bit from the icing. But we also don't want there to be too much that it overflows off the side. If you haven't had an overflow cookie, kudos to you. I have had many an overflow cookie. So we finished the green section. Next, we're going to move on to orange. And again, I'm going to outline the outside of the cookie first. And then I'm going to do the final like dividing line that I carved in with my scribe. And then do the outside of the cookie on the other side. I went a little over the edge, so I grabbed my scribe to just scrape that little extra bit of icing off. And then I'm going to line right against that green. And I wasn't getting the right amount of icing out of that. It might have been curling a little bit off the end. So I'm adding that line. And it's crazy what a simple thin line can do to keep the wave look and not make it look a little splotchy. It's odd. I recommend maybe on a cookie or on a piece of parchment paper, kind of quote unquote decorating without outlining first and seeing how your colors kind of blend together, or how it just looks a little frumpy. It doesn't look as intentional as if you outline each section individually. Now the hole for my orange was cut a little bit bigger, so this icing filled in much quicker than my green or even my yellow. So the last color we're coming in with is that blue. And again, I am outlining between the two colors. And then this time I just outline the entire edge of the cookie because we're on an end. And then I'm going to fill this in. What is slightly different about this cookie is we are going to set these cookies aside and wait until we decorate all of the other cookies, and then we're going to come back and add the peace sign. We're letting them thicken just a little bit. Not too much. We're not going to immediately come add the peace sign on top. We're not going to wait a day and then add the peace sign. We're just going to wait till we decorate the rest of our cookies. So you could even do these cookies first, decide how many you want to do. So now these have dried just a little bit. I'm going to come in with my white and make a circle. And the circle does not have to be perfect, but I do recommend going slow. And you can see I am directly above it. I'm not putting the tip of my piping bag onto the cookie. That cookie is still wet. I am hovering it over probably about a centimeter above and letting the icing flow down. This is how you can have a little bit more control over your line. And I do that circle at least 3 times, if not 4. And then I'm going to cut that circle in half. That's the beginning of our peace sign. And I go over that line twice. And then I do the little triangle section and I go over that one twice. Actually I do it 3 times. And there is our peace sign cookie. Now I am seeing a couple spots that had a little bit too much icing, and I'm coming in with my scribe. I'm just kind of evening those out, and our peace sign's done. The last cookie in the set, and my absolute favorite, is a kind of wavy daisy cookie. And we're going to start by outlining the cookie with this white royal icing. And instead of giving it a really full layer of white, we're just going to make sure the whole thing's covered, but we're not going to make sure that we're filling it too much. We're underfilling this. And you just heard me say, you don't want to underfill because you're going to get craters. Here's the thing. We're going to be adding quite a bit of icing on top of this white layer. And so by making sure that we have a white layer that would eventually lead us to having craters, we are going to make sure we're not going to have too much icing at the very end of this cookie. So I'm just making sure that the entire cookie is covered. But if I'm already seeing craters in this, and you can kind of see there's a texture to how much icing is on there, I just want to spread it out as evenly as possible before I move on to the next step. I just want to make sure all the icing is to the edges as much as possible and that the entire cookie is covered. And then I'm going to come in with one of my colors. I chose orange. You can do any color and just do a circle right in the middle. I'm just really piping a good amount of icing. And then I'm going to do 6 dots evenly surrounding that circle and leaving some space. So I start off doing every other. And because I'm doing 2, I'm then do 2 evenly spaced across those and then 2 more on the other side. And what this is doing is giving us a reference for how we're going to pipe on these wavy petals, because this is telling us where we want the petals to be. And there doesn't need to be any sort of perfection to these petals whatsoever because they're wavy and they're fun. But we're initially piping around that little dot we placed there and then kind of just going in and out. And then at the end, when we reach the edge of the cookie, we're going across and repeating in and out until we meet again at the front, at the very beginning edge of that petal. And we repeat that for every single one of those dots. We do want to make sure that we're leaving space in between each of the petals. You can see that there's white space in between each of the petals, and that we leave a little bit of space at the edge of the cookie so there's still white space after the petal before the cookie ends. And we just keep repeating that. And we don't need to fill in so fully that our petal spreads. This is again taking a little bit of time to add maybe a little less icing than we need, because we can always add more, and we actually will come back and fill in any of the spots that still have white peeking through. But there doesn't need to be any sort of uniformity to these petals. That's the fun part about making them wavy. And I'm just filling in this last section. Again, no kind of uniformity to how they look. Just making sure that the whole thing is filled in with just as small amount of icing as I possibly can. Then I'm going to come in with my scribe and kind of even it out. The cookie actually evened out very nicely with this icing. I hope that yours acts the same way. And I'm going to just fill in any of these white spots I see by just doing like a little blob of orange on top, just for any of these white spots. And I have my scribe handy that I can kind of mix them in if I need to, but for the most part, they all settled wonderfully without me having to do anything about them. And you can literally watch this icing settle before your eyes. It was quite lovely and one of the easier cookies, even though you're freehanding the whole thing. Lastly, I'm going to use my scribe to add in any sort of curves that I want in my petal. You can see me doing that right here. And then that is your groovy flower. And there you have it. You have your groovy beginner sugar cookies. You got your 3 different designs. If they don't look like mine, power to you that you took some creative freedom. I certainly know when it came to the tie-dye ones, I wasn't loving any of them. So I hope you liked yours more. And I also can see that there's a dog hair right in this cookie. Prime example of why I do not sell my sugar cookies. I also am absolutely in love with how this flower one came out. I have wanted to do this cookie for years, and this was the perfect set for it. And finally, with the peace sign, I thought that these would feel a lot harder to do with doing the white peace sign on top. But it really is just about taking your time with it a little bit more, which is not, patience is not my strong suit. Hopefully it's better for you. Now, to get the full directions that include text and images, please download the guide that you'll find in the comments below. And if you want to decorate some more sugar cookies with me, you can find more free guides over on my website, which again, you'll find on the link below. But you can also just check out my channel where you'll find a whole bunch of beginner sugar cookie decorating tutorials. If there's anything that you would like me to cover, please let me know. But if not, I'll see you next time.